Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the screening of Yes, I Am, the Rick Whalen story as part of the Docs and Talks for the Global Alliance for Behavioral Health and Social Justice. I'm VGR. I'm a psychologist by training, and I'm the chair of the LGBTQ plus task force of the Alliance. And we have several panelists today who will be joining in conversation. We are so glad that you are here with us today. So let me first begin by introducing every member of our panel. We have Dr. Daniela Recabarren, who is the Associate Director for Health Equity and Direct Services at the Center for Integrated Care at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. We have Aaron Baer, who is the Director and Producer of the Yes, I Am, the Rick Whalen story, and other documentaries. We have Mike Schaefer, who is the surviving partner of Rick Whalen. And we have Gil Varcella. He's an actor, compassionate listening facilitator, and a certified trainer with the HeartMath Institute. So I'm so glad to have you here today to join the conversation. And so we'll begin with a few questions that we have for the panelists, and then we hope to hear from those of you who are participating today and sharing your questions and comments that you may have for the panel. So let me begin. My first question is related to the film. And Aaron, I hope you can get us started here. Can you tell us more about your experience, relationship to the Yes, I Am, the Rick Whalen story documentary? What would you like to share with those joining us today?
My relationship with it definitely shifted over the years. You know, I was coming off of making a documentary about a trans friend of mine, and when this film sort of landed in my lap, I sort of naively thought, oh, it's about somebody that I've heard of, and it'll take a year to make. And diving into Rick's life, I had no idea how much he would change me as a filmmaker and as a human being. And it deepened my relationships with Gil and with Mike and some of the other folks involved. And the experience was very much a roller coaster, and lots of unknowns, which is pretty typical for documentary filmmaking. But Rick was such a hidden person and a complicated person that there was a lot of uncovering and sort of detective work that I had to do. And then having to cascade out that information to Gil and to Mike, and then in the end, make this very much well-rounded documentary. So yeah, I was telling a friend the other day that it's amazing that I completed it and that it came out. So yeah, it was a very good experience in the end.
Thank you. Mike, Danny, or Gil, do you want to share some of your experiences with the film?
I guess I can jump in. Aaron's heard this story before, but it's kind of like, the telephone rings and somebody you don't know says, "Hey, I'd like to do a documentary on some of the worst days of your life." And you're like, "Okay, yeah, I think I'll sign up for that." Who are you again? And so Aaron has done, a phenomenal job, and I am grateful in that telling complicated stories and having everyone kind of weigh in on their perspective and challenges is not easy. And I thought from the beginning, like, I don't know, this is not a story I could tell. And to be able to condense it into an hour is, as anyone that's seen the movie knows, is pretty tough. And I think Aaron and his team have done a great job. So my relationship has really been one of a storyteller, and I think I'll continue telling stories. I mean, there's some phenomenal things that we've learned, that I've learned through my time with Rick and with the impact of his philanthropy. And I think that kind of bottom line for me, things that we could share today is that people with immense personal struggles really do have the ability to give back to our community, to share and be grateful and contribute. And I think that if we can get that out of the Rick story, there are so many other stories like this that need to be shared as time goes on. So I look forward to everybody's questions, and I think that we've all kind of grown together through making this movie. So thank you again, Aaron.
For me, just to add to everything that's been said, it was a very communal experience to create this film, and I'm so grateful to Aaron for inviting me to participate. And I portrayed Rick in the film, and it was a very interesting journey to portray someone who's so multifaceted in a film that really showcases so many of his different facets. And so to me, that was a major takeaway, just understanding that all of us are very complicated beings with a lot of gifts and a lot of vulnerabilities. And it was also a really great opportunity for myself to tap into my own gifts and my own vulnerabilities, my own places of darkness as well, that in order to fully embody this character. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts of this film, just showcasing the complexity of our humanity.
No, Algernon would I think that the words, Mike, you mentioned complicated and guilt, complexity, and I feel like that for me ties so deeply with the film, of thinking my relationship. I was not part of the filmmaking, but on a personal level, as a queer person, as a queer Latina woman, right? Finding the complexities of both the joy in the community and also the burnout that comes sometimes, the exhaustion. I think it was something that was felt so relatable, and professionally as a mental health provider, as a psychologist. I think that piece around mental health and how easy it is not to talk about it, and how much pressure I think sometimes we as individuals, we as people put on the idea of giving, moving forward, and not attending to that space. So I don't know. I think that there was multiple things that I very much connected, and I think that I see it with a lot of people of the brushing off and trying to put a brave face, but the exhaustion that builds up underneath when it's not talked about it.
Thank you, everyone. You are sort of bringing a lot of points about what the film brings around that complexity of human beings, around the ongoing, if you want, struggle and effort to deal with some of the challenges the LGBTQI community was experiencing then, still experiencing today, certainly thinking in light of the very rapid advancement of bills trying to curtail the rights of the LGBTQI community. We have had over 500 bills in the last few months in this country and around different states that are reminding us also sort of the personal struggles with your life, but also the personal struggles in trying to advocate for your rights as an individual, as a queer person, for yourself and those in your family and communities. So in thinking about that, and this question, maybe I'll have Gil start us there. How do the events and situations portrayed in the documentary relate to the experiences of the LGBT community today? Some of the challenges as well as gains.
Mhm. I think you started answering that actually, and so just following up on what you began to say. First of all, the struggles are not over. I mean, right now we're not dealing with marriage equality the way we did 20 years ago. We have medications for HIV, and people, for the most part, if they get the care, they live with HIV, right? It's not that crisis that it used to be. And yet there's still so many struggles, right? Our trans community is under attack. We're seeing all these bills, as you mentioned, prop up to limit access, to limit drag queens and drag shows. So the struggle has just changed its form in a way, but it's still very much with us. And related to that is the impact that all of that has on our mental and emotional well-being. And so we know, for example, that suicide rates among trans folks is significantly higher than the rest of the population, and that applies to the entire community. And so that connection between the social struggles and the emotional and mental struggles as individuals still exists very much today.
Thank you, Gil. Anyone else would like to comment? Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I can say, I mean, this hostility that's in the community at large against the most vulnerable of our population is just, heartbreaking. And yet at the same time, we've been demonized forever as an LGBTQ plus community. So part of me goes, we know how to be resilient. We know what it's like to be demonized. We wish this would go away. We wish that every new generation would be more insightful, tolerant, whatever. But bottom line, what we continue to struggle with is how do you build capacity? How do you build resilience? How do you pass along the confidence that we've learned the hard way to a new generation of leaders? And these are not easy challenges. And just because we have experience, that experience doesn't do you any good unless you continue to apply it. And I think, Daniela, you were talking about burnout. You were talking about, how do you inspire people to step up to these challenges when some of the things we have to fight are so unfair, or unreal, or you're picking on trans kids is just such an embarrassment to humanity. I mean, why would you demonize the most vulnerable among us? And yet that is such an easy target. So, I think that we have a lot to learn and pass along. And I don't think these, the challenges against the most vulnerable are never going to go away. So, here we are again. And I look forward to some of this discussion because this is what we need to do.
Thank you, Gil. Thank you, Mike. And I think in some ways, Mike, you gave me the segue for the next question that we have. And I'm going to ask Danny to get us started, right? So we are definitely talking about this sort of ongoing challenges, oppression, and hostile environments that our communities have experienced. We have had some gains, but we continue to face struggles, and some of these renewed efforts, particularly tagging the most vulnerable within our community, are sort of very concerning. Considering this is how do we then contribute to creating spaces that can promote the well-being, right? That can help the LGBTQ community and allies as well in facing these challenges. And how can we do better to create conditions that actually promote healing and support?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and would love to hear other people's feedback. Mike, I think that when you were sharing, like it like just reminded the process, and like I've been doing this for like a number of years, but I know that people have been doing this for a long time, for generations, and like so much feels like the process of like picking up the pieces, and like finding hope and like going back at it again, because it feels like a cycle, right? But I think that for me, when I think about like making spaces that are going to like contribute to for healing, I think the first part feels like visibility. And I think that we see, I mean, this film, right, this documentary, that's visibility. That's beautiful of like bringing the story forward. But I think about like how many places we are that visibility doesn't exist. When we think about workspaces, institutions, like are there non-discrimination policies that are there to protect, right? Harassment policies that exist. Are we making room for chosen names, for pronouns? Who is at the table talking about these pieces? And when I think about, we're talking about the most vulnerable, right? There's the LGBTQ community, but then we have, like we talked about, trans folks, and then queer and trans folks of color, right? Who are the most likely to experience violence, the most likely to experience bias towards healthcare and healthcare access and legal services. So I think that for me, like, there's so many ways that we can impact by first, like, who are we listening to in the space that is making like decisions, and how are we making sure that queer and trans folks have voices in those spaces? How are we inviting them? How are we making sure that that queerness is actually visible at work, in families, in institutions? And then I think that we do have to talk about a policy piece as well, right? And thinking about, especially when we have a voice, like, so I think for myself, as a white presenting, a cis, straight presenting woman, I have access to different spaces and I can say things. I can tell a person, what you're saying is bigoted, or, like that is not okay or appropriate to say. Or I can make suggestions about, is this something that is including everyone? Is this a book that we're selecting? Is it telling the stories of everyone? That's a whole other conversation. But I think that there is so much impact that we can have individually, and even just like as a small thing of like, what are the pictures that we have selected, and how is that telling the stories of everyone, or of many individuals, many people? And then the reality of also policies, like calling representatives. Who are you selecting? If you have the power for, like in politics and voting, how is it that you're using your individual power there too? So I feel like that can be a really long conversation. I'm going to pause right now because I would love to hear the rest of the group, what everyone is thinking.
Thank you, Danny. Aaron.
One of the things that Rick has inspired me in terms of my work is how do I give back? Asking that question to myself, how do I give back to my own community? And I recently found this organization that essentially fosters and mentors other queer filmmakers. And it's this community is within the filmmaking world it's a niche community that's sort of carved out. And there's certain even film festivals that they see you have a queer film and you're kind of automatically passed over, or you're queer, identify as a queer filmmaker, and they will just glaze right over you. So it is what you were saying, Daniela, is having that, using whatever voice that you have, and using it for good. And that's what Rick has done for myself, is inspired me to do that. And I'm still figuring it out along the way, but I can see it actually happening.
Thank you. Mike or Gil, do you want to add some thoughts about how do we help create conditions that are actually supportive and of the LGBTQI community.
I'm happy to respond to that. I think in terms of the external conditions, Danielle spoke to it really, really beautifully and comprehensively. And the one thing when Erin was speaking, the one thing that came up for me was our resilience as a community, right? Finding ways to support each other within our communities, within our own family, to come back to our own life-giving practices, to find our own resilience. And Mike, you were speaking to that a little bit earlier too. And so I think that's an important component to remember as well. You know, the world keeps telling us that we don't belong. It keeps reinforcing these stories of disconnection and shame. And I think within that, finding our own resilience, finding ways to come back to community, come back to connection, come back to life-giving practices is also really important. And not as a separate thing, right? I mean, all the external circumstances have to be dealt with 100%. And we also get to remind ourselves of our belonging and do that together in community.
Yeah, thank you. Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just witnessing that we are a caring community, regardless of what other people say about us, right? And so it's that it's kind of that World War II poster of the woman machinist. We can do this. We have the power. We just lose sight of it so easily because we get distracted or demonized. And so in my generation, the community at large was demonizing dying people, like we're paying for our sins kind of trauma. Like, what kind of unfair message is that? And so we had to step up and work with others to provide that care that everyone else was not feeling compelled to address. And now I think it's the same, violence against all of America. I mean, hello, like, yes, it's horrible that people go in and shoot up gay bars, but they're shooting up our elementary schools. And there's just so much violence and hostility around us that remembering that we need to focus on the kindness and compassion at the same time we're addressing the violence and not ignoring it is the missing piece. Like, we are a compassionate people, but why is it that is never in the news? And that's a story you can never tell enough. The kindness is out there, the compassion is out there. It's just nobody sells newspapers on that story, right? So our job is to not lose sight of that picture and not lose sight of that it takes work and repeated effort and an awareness to stay focused on that story on top of everything else. So there's lots more we can talk about, but Daniela, I think it's really, you were right. You can go anywhere with this question and we could be here all day. So I think it's up to, the audience and the viewers or wherever to tell us what is it of most interest, and we can share our thoughts. That's where I am.
Thank you, Mike. I think I appreciated every single one of your answers. And I think you said something just right now, Mike, too, that is sort of how important it is to remember our history, right? And that we have faced these kinds of challenges, this kind of oppression in this level of intensity before. It just showed up a little different, right? In the same sort of kind of, if you want, narrative showing up again, and sort of the importance of reminding ourselves that we survived that and we went past that. Reminding ourselves also the contributions of the LGBTQ community in so many different arenas. And then I think, Erin, you mentioned also coming together with groups, right? So creating groups of people who come together to work. So creating that sense of community, that sense of join, if you want, I don't want to say it's struggle, but join and sort of commitment to changing things, to represent our community and to get us past the challenges. And I would say if being a member of this community and sort of being aware of these issues, you can never be bored. There are so many different opportunities to contribute, and they don't have to be huge, right? It's sort of, we can make a difference in our day-to-day life. So thank you. I'm going to move to our next question, and hopefully the audience can sort of direct us where they would like to see this conversation going in a few minutes as well. And Mike, this next question is for you. In considering the relationship between philanthropy and advocacy, what have we learned? What do we need to keep in mind when operating in hostile environments like the one that we are currently living, and certainly the one where Rick was operating and you were operating in the past, right? So can you share some of your wisdom and some of your experience with us as we continue to do the work?
Yeah. I think there's many ways to look at impactful philanthropy, and there's books written and foundations based on this, on what kind of metrics, and how do you put money in here and see impact come out over there. And I think that at our particular time of investing in the gay rights and AIDS movement in the early 90s, this was very much uncharted territory. And I think the movie does hit on that pretty well, on how unusual it was to try to find donors who had the confidence that Rick had of, like, okay, you're a new organization with a $200,000 a year budget, hoping to have $1 million a year budget, and we want to give you $1 million. Like, how do you do that? Right? We're it's not like we're going to sit down at the table and say, we'd like to give you $1 million, but we have the capacity. We know we have the capacity to do it. We know the need is out there, but it's like, all right, who is it that's leading this effort? It's an investment in people, because it's easy to spend money. It's hard to get results. And so it's sitting down and figuring out why you trust this particular leader and this particular vision and focus to make a difference. And we were fortunate to be successful entrepreneurs and investors. And so when you invest in the stock market, for example, you learn how to look at an annual report and a business statement. You learn how to look at a balance sheet and a return, and kind of go, okay, what is this organization, whether it's a private business or a nonprofit, able to accomplish on their own? What is their track record? And whether it's a startup or a new nonprofit working on a new issue, it's like, okay, what are they focused on executing on their own? It's not like us as donors want to come in and say, hey, we want you to do what we want. Instead, we want to know what you want to do and how you've accomplished it, because until you can fulfill your own driven goals, why would I have confidence that you can fulfill anybody else's? And these issues just get, as we've seen, just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so it's an investment in capacity. It's an investment in seeing how nimble an organization can be, a leader can be. And it's also an investment in collaboration, because you can't do it alone. And so, yeah, who are you working with? I mean, whether they're straight allies, whether it's other LGBTQ plus organizations, it's the breadth of your network that gives you confidence that this is an opportunity not to be missed, because you can't jump on every opportunity. I mean, and especially in a hostile environment, we used to laugh. It's kind of like a game of whack-a-mole. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but you whack a problem over here, and guess what? Another one comes up over there, and that is the game. Like, that is not going to go away. And so you're back to just like, what makes people want to continue to address those challenges? And so, I think it's all about investing in leaders. It's investing in, well-paying jobs, living wages. It's investing in professional development and training. It's investing in opportunities for conferences, because donors can't create an environment of success. We can fund them, but you have to tell us what that stuff is. And I think over the years, like I'll give you one of the most compelling examples in our philanthropy. In the early 90s, we were investing in AIDS research. There are people that have stuck to that AIDS research career for 40 years now. And they're like, they couldn't have afforded to pay off their college bills without the kind of grants and scholarships we were funding. And because we were able to fund them through those tough financial years at the beginning of their career, they were able to have an entire career focused on this problem. And so I think that's, to me, some of the most effective philanthropy, is that people have found their life's work in a way that is rewarding. And that's, we need that in every aspect of our movement. So I probably talked enough. Again, people write books on this, so I could just share my perspective, and I have stories.
Yes, yeah, no, your experience, certainly, as you said, in the early 90s, there was really not a model to follow. And being able to sort of figure out a way in supporting these efforts, and sort of those lessons are very important as we continue, as you say, the never ending game of what is the next thing that's popping up that we need to deal with. So thank you so much for that, sharing your experience and thoughts with us. I'm going, unless someone else wants to add on this topic, I'm going to go ahead and move to our next question. Okay. So Gil, I'm going to ask if you can get us started with answering this first question. This next question. Rick's impact has been vast and will continue to affect future generations. What do you think is the continued impact, has been the continued impact in your life? And what actions can we all take towards collective action, right? So think about collective action at all levels, what we can do as individuals in our day-to-day lives, and what can we do as larger members of the community, of our society.
Mhm. So working on this film and spending time with Rick's legacy definitely made me think a lot about influence and about leadership, and asking myself in what ways I can participate, I can contribute. And Rick, of course, was incredibly influential, very affluent, and used his power and his privilege for a lot of good. And I think there are ways for each of us to do the same thing. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was born and raised in Israel, right? That's one identity that I hold. And one of the things that I do now is I guide compassionate listening delegations to Israel and Palestine, where we meet with people from the entire political spectrum and listen to their stories and learn about the dynamics of that conflict. That's a way for me to engage in a very intense situation in a good way, in a way that is aligned with my gifts and with my worldview. Aaron gave another beautiful example, working with queer filmmakers and contributing his gifts and his skills to elevate them and to mentor them. And I think there are ways for each of us to use our sphere of influence and to create those changes, whether large or small, within our profession, within our organization, within our communities. And I see it as planting seeds, right? Just contributing to the change to the world that we want to see in a way that actually resonates with us.
Thank you, Gil. I wonder if Danny or Aaron or Mike, you want to share something?
I have stories. So, I mean, one thing that I learned from Rick early on, and I think it is useful and has helped me talk with others, is I have to acknowledge my place of privilege. I mean, have been incredibly lucky to have a great education, to have supportive family, to have opportunities and doors open for me. And yet, like, Rick knew in college that he was going to have a lifelong struggle with depression. He did not know in college that he was going to be successful. much less a philanthropist, much less an LGBTQ rights activist. But he did know that he was going to have to struggle with his demons. And, part of what he did as a coping mechanism was a daily journal, which Aaron has benefited from and the movie has benefited from. But he didn't write that for posterity. He wrote that to deal with his daily demons and understand on a daily basis how to be grateful. What was the bright spot in his day? And I think that whether it was his HIV diagnosis or just the AIDS era, he also realized that he wasn't going to be on the planet very long, and that what gifts he had, he was going to, like all of us, we don't leave the planet with anything. So what are you going to do with the time that you have, and how are you going to stay focused on what you can do? And so he knew he had the financial resources to empower community. We didn't have a strategy on gay marriage or gay adoptions or lesbian health or transgender kids. I mean, there were just so many issues to pick from that we had to learn early on that you have to trust the leaders in the movement to guide where the money goes. And so this is, again, just a lesson I've learned of, stay focused on where your strength and abilities are, and let the other professionals, the people who have the vision, the passion, the ability to drive this stuff forward, let them do their job and stay out of the way. All right, I'll let Aaron and Daniela contribute here.
Well, one of the other impacts that Rick has had is, finishing this film making a documentary takes an emotional toll on a lot of levels. And I was having this feeling of I'm not going to make another documentary after this one, just because it is so difficult. But what I've realized now that I'm on the other side of it is that it is something that I'm good at doing and that I actually do love to do. And Rick inspired that and challenged that along the way. And now that it's completed, I can see clearly in a way that I've never been able to see before. And Rick also, inspired me to take my own mental health journey for the very first time, because I mean, what a strange thing it would be for, as a filmmaker, especially a documentary filmmaker, to be making a film about someone who went through these struggles and me ignoring my own struggles and not paying attention to them. So I dove into, therapy for the very first time and really diving in the deep end to a lot of my own stuff. And Rick inspired that. And yeah, just in how I carry myself in this world and what's important to me, and all of the things that Mike and Gil both said. It's just it somehow is all led to today. And like Mike was saying, being grateful for the things that you do have, even through your challenges. Rick has been able to help me see that.
I feel like I can't add much because I connect with a lot of like what people are saying of like, like your own sphere of influence and like taking care of yourself. And I think that like with Rick's documentary, I think that piece of like joy also really stayed with me, of like there are these moments, and like I think that's a beautiful thing about like queer identities. Like relationships look different, and like part of my language, but like whatever, like it's like around, like as far as like narratives and social like expectations, and it's just so powerful and beautiful. And like so I think that like being able to like take that complicated, right, of like there's moments that are tough, but there's something like so powerful and beautiful about being in community. And I think I really want to hold on to that, especially as I'm hearing you talk right now.
Thank
Could
you.
I just jump in? I gotta say, like, I love all the buzz in the Black community these days about Black joy, and how wonderful it is for the Black community and how wonderful it is to be shared. And I just look at drag in the gay community and go, why would anyone want to deny the gay community or any community our joy? And it's just like, okay, here it is again. They're demonizing anything they can about us. And I'm like, give me a break. If we want to dress up and go out and have fun, how is that possibly hurting kids? I just like, to see people revel in their joy is just like a privilege we shouldn't have to fight for. So, it is just the way life is. And I just have to laugh sometimes on the things that get picked to be, like really, really, truly, this is what we're going to have to argue for. Give me a break.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing how Rick, you're knowing Rick or creating the film or just being someone who watches the film instead of really gets to see that complexity of a human being, but also understanding how he used his strengths in the midst of the other challenges he was facing to really make a difference with the gifts he had and the resources he has. And I think you also pointed out to how can we make a difference with whatever the resources and gifts each of us have in bringing in. So before I open to questions from our audience, is there anything else that any of you members of the panel would like to share before we move on to those questions? Okay, maybe some other ideas come up as we sort of engage with the questions that were posed by our audience. So I'm going to start with the first question. And the first question is, what are the challenges you face creating the movie? How can we better support your work and other movies work that talk about issues faced by the LGBTQ+ community?
There were a lot of challenges making this film, and ironically, raising the funds is always a gigantic roadblock to making a queer documentary. And Mike so graciously opened up his home to do fundraising parties, and it's really trying to sell a story to folks who are really sort of angel investors and believing in what you're doing, and sort of what we were talking about earlier. It's just giving to something that could be good, but in the end it was just a few folks who really financially made this film happen. And I realized that to help other queer filmmakers, I mean, it takes money to make films and to have a voice, and especially in times like this. And you can apply to all of the grants and all of the filmmaking things in the world, but you're up against many other individuals and folks. And I have found that I've been able to hone and my own personal fundraising skills. But yeah, I would just say to support is just being able to, even if it's a conversation or to a friend who is a filmmaker or a queer person, is being a solid human being to them. Because making a film like this, it can feel like you're in a vacuum a lot, and you're operating on many different levels at many different times, and you're trying to be everything to everybody at the same time. And I think just having, what I have found in the end is having solid people in your life, and Mike and Gil were both of those people along the way, even though they were involved at this very inherent level. I hope that helps answer the question in a way, but yeah, it's just being able to support.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, and I think also making people aware of documentaries and films made by queer filmmakers dealing with queer issues, because often, as you, I think, share with us, Erin, sort of getting the support and actually getting the visibility and making sure that these kinds of stories come to light and are shared with not just with a selected group of people, but with as many people as possible. It's also, and I think each of us can certainly do our little bit in whatever way we can to make sure those stories also have a space in our own social dialogue.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the other really big, it was a hurdle, but I kind of just left it when I felt like it was most appropriate to figure it out. And, how do I tell a story about someone who took their own life, and how do I, not make it the Wikipedia entry and sort of glaze over that? I know I needed to focus on that. And because that was important to me to show someone who sort of had it all in a way on paper, but really struggled always. And that exists within our community. And how do I show that in the most appropriate way? Because that it's so easy to exploit, and for everyone involved, especially for Mike, I didn't want to, that's not my style anyways. And I didn't want to show it in a way that would upset. I mean, it's upsetting regardless, but I didn't want to show it in this sort of, very exploitive way. And that took a while to figure out how to do that correctly.
Yeah, I think you did a great job of really showing the humanity, right, and also showing Rick's struggles in a compassionate, in real way. So thank you. Does anyone else wants to add anything about sort of making sure that work like this gets produced, gets created, and gets seen by others? Thank you. We have another question. It's a little different from the previous one. And the question is, what can we do to make our schools a safer place for LGBTQ plus youth and their teachers, especially in states like Florida with the so-called Don't Say Gay bills and legislation? And I don't know who would like to get started with it. How to create safer spaces? Mike.
I always have an opinion on these things. Well, and I think I've already set the stage for this, right? I mean, we've been, as philanthropists, been working on how to support the LGBTQ community in schools for 30 years. GLSEN is the organization that leads this. The Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network is how it started out. They support the gay straight alliances in high schools across the country. We have seen this go from, being a pariah in schools to, I think, more than 30,000 high schools now have gay straight alliances all across the country. We are not going to solve this overnight. And we've been working on it for 30 years. And it's not, I mean, I'd like to say it's getting better, but there's always going to be these challenges. So, what can we do? I mean, I think first we have to remember that we've been working on this for a long time. We have successes. We will continue to work on this, and we will continue to have successes. We are always going to have challenges, and we need to know where to focus. I'll give you a perfect example. Maybe, I don't know, 15 years ago, I was at a conference for funders of the gay rights movement, and we had hired this consultant to kind of evaluate going through a 50-state effort to try to get marriage equality on a state-by-state level rather than a federal level. And they laid out the timeline, and basically it would take 1,000 years to get gay marriage passed in the state of Alabama. And so we kind of went, we're not waiting 1,000 years. We have to work at the federal level. We have to make the courts respond. We have to look at other avenues. And I think it's going to be the same with the state of Florida or some of these other areas. We are going to have to figure out where to apply leverage. and whether it's elected officials, whether it's courts, whether it's school districts, it's you can't go into this blindly, and we have to go into it for the long haul. So it's not an easy answer. I wish I could say, having an ally in every school is huge. How do you get an ally in every school? I mean, maybe I have to talk to people like Daniela. I mean, it's just, they're there, but they're not feeling empowered. They're not feeling supported. They're feeling a lot of hate, hostility, and rejection. And that is, that's par for the course. That's what we sign up for when we say we're here to make a change. So bottom line, I'm saying don't give up, but it's also like work with the organizations that are out there. PFLAG, I mean, there's so many things we can do to support each other, and just getting the word out that these organizations have support and skills, maybe not the capacity that we want, but we know how to do this. So my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mike. Daniela, do you want to add something to this conversation?
I mean, Mike, I appreciate your wisdom so much. And I was like writing notes. It's like, yes, that is such a great perspective. So I appreciate very much that. So very much support the ideas, especially of like organizations, like local chapters. If you are a parent, being on school boards, right? Like using your voice. But on the mental health level that you were mentioning, Mike, there's a lot of research that shows, so transgender youth particularly, right, have a really high level for risk of suicidality. But one supporting adult can make a huge difference in that person's well-being and mental health. So I think that we keep talking about this, the big level, the local level, and then the personal level is make yourself available and supportive to your friends, to your family, and to youth. Like for kids to know that there's adults that are supporting them and that they're going to go to bat for them, that they're gonna be there to share and to have conversations that maybe they don't have spaces for, they don't feel supported in, can make a huge difference. So I think that, I don't know, I feel like this is sort of the intrinsic lesson that keeps coming up. Is finding where you have impact, and even the smallest things, being how are you, how can I help you, or bringing to something welcoming, right? Or taking youth to Pride Parade, being able to do those small things can make a huge difference. And I know it's not going to impact the school system and the school setting, because I do believe that that's very much a long game. But want to recognize that there's multiple ways to be able to support, especially support burnout.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Sometimes it's just being present and being visible and being able to listen can make a big difference. But both, I would say the youth, the parents, and the teachers too, who are in also a very difficult position. And I think in the last few minutes that we have together today, we have another question. Do you have any suggestions for key discussion points to raise in watching the documentary with a group of young people or older adolescents? Any sort of discussion points that anyone screening the film could share with youth?
I can respond to that. I like to think of it as, when you say discussion points, I like to think of it as kind of questions, for discussion. And I think since the film is so broad, I think there's always space for an open-ended question, such as what really resonated with you? Where do you see yourself in this film? What really spoke to you? And beyond that, I think you did a great job in highlighting some of the key points that I would also love to ask young participants, namely, what are some of the historical struggles that our community went through? What are some gains? What are some current challenges that we're facing right now? That's number one. Number two, on the personal level, what are some ways that you feel seen and supported and celebrated through your queer identity? And also, what are some challenges that you are personally facing right now? And number 3, moving forward, what can we do? What can you do personally? What can we do as a community to continue to support each other and move towards the world that we want to see?
Thank you, Gil. Anyone else has some suggestions? Aaron?
That's ditto to what Gil just said.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. We have a few minutes left, and I'm wondering if the panel just wants to say a few additional words before we thank the audience and we end our gathering today.
Yeah, so the film is available. I mean, you can send it to your friends and family. It's on Apple TV Plus, Amazon, and a few others. So you can buy it or rent it there. You can also, if you want to dive deeper. So I had to digitize all of Rick's journals that dated back from 1975 or 1976, and they're public. So you can, if you want, you can go read his journals at the Stanford Library's archives. And, you know, there's some really amazing and insightful stuff into how one's brain operates from day to day. And I highly recommend it as sort of a bookend or a plus to the film as well.
Thank you, Aaron. And
I have to comment on that. I have to comment on that because, Aaron, you're a saint for reading through.
Yeah.
I'm living with someone who kept his diary daily. I never wanted to know. Like, it was a practice. It was a discipline. I didn't realize, in the scheme of things, how much volume this would add up to, and it was like a flabbergasting moment when the Stanford archivists show up in their white gloves to go through your file cabinets and save everything for posterity. And I'm thinking, who is ever going to read this? It's a joy to have met you.
Hello.
I don't know about anybody else wanting to wade through it all, but it is perfectly preserved by the archivists. You are right. So onwards, I guess. You never know where that stuff goes.
It was useful.
Yeah, thank you. And this is a brief reminder for our audience. If you haven't watched the documentary, the film, please, you can watch it. You should have a link until May 30th to watch the documentary if you sign up for this panel. And if you watch it again, you want to sort of, now after this conversation, you want to watch it again, is again available for you. And feel free to share with others the film and any thoughts that you may have. So again, in closing, thank you, Aaron, thank you, Mike, thank you, Gil, thank you, Daniela, and the Global Alliance for making this event possible. Thank you, the entire audience, for participating. And certainly, I would say we have a much work to do, but we also have to recognize all the gains that and successes we have had along the way. So take care. We also have shared some information around organizations that you can connect with, as well as resources you may want to take advantage of for your own well-being. So thank you again, everyone. It has been a pleasure to share this space and this conversation with you.
Thank you, VGR.
Thank you.